Excellent. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, everyone. Hello, Les, Eric, Jim. So we're giving it's Monday. We're giving a quick tour of the latest development of the portal, the DigLive portal, and hopefully go a little bit into cards, what cards are, card development, where I see cards playing out in the social ledger, and also let's mention the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals from United Nations, and how they can be implemented and how we can make use of them using the social ledger, using some other tools. So this is going to be fun. Let me share my screen. All right, everybody see that big green C? The DigLive Collective. All right. So we are at the portal now. And oh, Jim, great news here. You see that URL called staging.diglive.coop. So this is actually coming directly out of a production to staging environment. So I'm developing this stuff on Code Sandbox, which is an online IDE, and I'm able to now push this to a staging environment, so we can actually test the new features first before it goes to the production environment, which is at diglive.coop, right? So as soon as you type that in, you get to the production version of it. If you want to see the latest, just go to staging.diglive.coop and you get to this screen here, right? So this is sort of my sandbox. This is where I'm testing out new features. And Les, before I go ahead, so have you seen this before? Are you familiar with some aspects of it? Let me see how far.
Yes, Michael obviously is very excited by the progress, and he's run me through. And we've tried the big blue buttons. So I'm somewhat familiar, but I haven't had a technical walkthrough.
Okay, sounds great. So I'll keep that a bit brief. Notice there's some main domain, so sections of this portal here. You see, home is selected right now. There's projects, there's operations, and there's friends. So we decided, in the last couple of weeks, months, to restructure the old Mattermost domain structure into something more simple. So we have home, projects, operations, and friends now. That's the basic structure. Home has, if you click on that, you see on the left side here, it's a menu pop out, the main channels you see in Mattermost. So reflecting the Mattermost structure here is announcements, the collective chat, and some other channels we have here. What's important, there's one for interest groups and one for called Settle Custom, and I will get to that in a moment, because those are the two that are card based, and where I want to build on this notion of how cards hook into social ledger and where we go with this in the future. But I wanted to show you two other features here that are now available to all users here. One is the Holonomic chart, which I changed now from the original one, from the Social Ledger 1 that I had. So this is now brought over into this new portal tool. And it shows you basically all of the domains under DigLive that we have on our Mattermost instance running, right? So here's home, here's operations, here's ecosystem maps, friends, and at the bottom here's projects, and then open learning. So it's the same as before, zoomable, right? You can go into layer by layer. You can actually go n layers deep, but I just limit that to I think 4 layers from now. So if I go one layer deeper here, you see something called important channels, and then interest groups, and then channels that are outside these two. So important channels, you'll see them with an exclamation mark in Mattermost. So they're just on top of the list. They're the ones that are a bit more outstanding, standing out compared to the others. And that includes stuff like the collective chat, obviously, then tech we might trust, decision making, orientation, help, announcements, all the important channels really you should see as a newcomer first, right? You should take a look closer. Versus the interest groups, so that's all of the channels marked with this hashtag in front. So this is where we talk about the topics of interest, right? So very informal conversations in these interest groups. They're not the work teams, so they are just ways for people to get engaged and to learn more about the different conversations we have in here. So that's that's the home domain, and then of course we have the operations domain with sysadmin, tech upkeep, operations stuff, member relations stuff. Also important channels again here, right? So the stewards channels here, directors and emerging strategy stuff. So that's the overall, uh, navigation of the Holonic chart. Notice there are two things actually put into this chart now. One is the size of the circle, gives an indication of how many posts or conversations are happening in that particular channel. And the second one is the fading in and out of these circles. Notice, some of them, and that's actually opaqueness factors. So they're fading into this background. So if they're hardly noticeable, like this one here, it's called a T house. This one here, member relations. That means not much has been posted in recent. I think my time frame is like a month or so. I'm counting the posts and then see how much activity is there. The ones that are bright white, they are the ones where you see recent activity, right? So obviously collective chat here, announcements, these are the two that are always most active. So this gives an idea at a glance, which from the size of the sphere, which ones are active, have a lot of posts, and which ones have recently, been seeing some activities. For me, it's very helpful. It's the beginning of a feedback loop here, right? So back to the user, back to the members, to see, oops, there's actually something happening over here. Let me dive into that. Let me take a look at what's going on. This sphere here, why is that? So recently, co-op directors obviously had some conversations there, right? And then you can go into each one if you want to. You can click on each, and then it brings you right into the corresponding Mattermost channel. To see the conversation, actually. So if I go to projects here, let me see if that works. I open up the social ledger channel right here on our Mattermost instance, the new instance. So notice on the left side, right, you have the 4 domains here, the big life domains. Is home, this is friends, this is operations, and this is projects. And these are the new domains we're beginning to add with this friends model. And I'll get into that too later if we have some time. So this is onboarding, the idea of onboarding entire collectives, right? So not only individual members for Dig Life, but in parallel onboarding new collectives. And these are ours right here. So here's Eric's stuff, Christina's stuff, and Michael's stuff. The plan is to make that list a lot longer. Our server can support that, so we can onboard a few hundred more members. Up to, I don't know, 1,000, 2,000 should be possible too, by adding more server capacity. And we're currently developing a model now to say, how do we onboard these, what services are we going to share and offer to these new collectives? And I'd love to have your input in that too, because that gets very much into the discussion of a cooperation as a service platform, this CAS thing that we've talked about, the multiplex thing that we talked about in the past. So a lot of these building blocks are slowly coming moving into position now, so we can actually do that. So that's the Holonic map. The other one that I ported over to the portal is also the skills map. This should actually show you. I don't know. It shows you the connections. Sometimes it doesn't. I have to check the code. There's a delay in loading the data and then connecting these different. Let me see, skills. Yeah, I have to make some changes. But what you would see is, if you hover over those, these are the members. The dotted lines show you those that have just joined. So here's Zach Anderson, joined 18 days ago. And underneath, you would see the different tags associated with each of the new members. Let me see if I can show you this in the code sandbox. That's too bad. So what I'm doing here, I'm loading the development environment. That's the place where I'm coding this stuff. I'm using a Vue.js programming language. That's a front-end language, and that's connected to Firebase as a backend. And then, let me see. Okay, so here, what you see here, quick glance at the new development environment. Left side is the file structure. In the center, you have the selected file. So if you take any of these components, say there's a skills components, that's the one that just failed to load here. I see the results directly on the right side here in my browser. That to me is like the dream development environment. You make a change here, and the coding changes are happening in real time on the right side. And if I'm happy with this, I can push another button. I can push it to GitHub from here, right? There's just saying, okay, what are the changes? Let me push it out to the latest GitHub version. And then I can deploy it from here too. Another button to say deploy it, push it out there, and then I can just switch an alias to put it on the staging and the production server. It's really easy to use. So let me see. Okay, so here you see actually the connections, right? So if I hover over any of these avatars, you can see the different tags popping up there. And that actually is an indicator for the connection. So here's Les, here's yours. Your tags are collaboration, coordination, governance, nonprofit. And then you're connected to a few others, like Karen Miller here. So governance is probably the one that's connecting you to Karen. Here to Graham, right? There's cooperation, collaboration, governance again. So depending on how many overlaps are there, that will tell you thickness of the line here. So the more this is connected, the thicker the line gets. If you have more overlap with the different skill sets we're using, we're collecting, and it's important to see that this is the skill sets. I have to go back there again. So if I click on mine, it opens up the editor where you can actually add and remove these different skill sets. And it's skill sets and expertise. What I don't want to see is the interests listed here, because then it gets too convoluted. There are too many interests in there. Obviously, a lot of people are interested in a lot of things, so that list gets very long very quickly, and then this gets even more denser, right? That network chart. What I try to do actually to reduce the density of the network chart is, you see these in red here. So what I do is I have an API that's looking at the semantic value of the wording. So if it's a more commonly used word, like strategy is a very common term, it tells me, okay, this is a common term, maybe we don't want to use that, right? So let's take it out. So sysadmin is a very common term, take that out. I don't know why social ledger comes up here. That's kind of strange. I don't think it's a very common term. But other terms in green, they should indicate then this is a good term. This is not used too little. That's right. I'm going in both directions here. So if it's really never been used or hardly been used on the internet, right, that term should also not be in the profile. It's too specific, right? So social ledger is a very specific term. It's probably it's only me and a few other people who actually use that term. So don't use that. So too specific. So design obviously then it's the other direction, too generic. And then participatory inquiry probably is going to be too specific again, right? But there are words who are falling into this green zone, which not too specific and not too generic. So they are the ones actually that make a lot of sense to build your profile with. That's what I'm doing here. Okay, let me close this here. Consume some resources on my machine, otherwise it freezes. Well, let me go back to the cards now, the card-based interface. I'm just experimenting here with a new thing that John Kelden has suggested. And that was something I really want to push out in one of the next releases, which is using the cards alongside with chats. Okay, so what his suggestion was, let me click on this at the bottom here. So these are the notes or notepads, as we call them. So simple standalone notes about certain topics. And you see, if I pull up one here, empathy protocol is a protocol, and you can see some of the tags associated to that note. There's empathy, listening protocol, and adult development skills. So this is now a note that I would like to see actually appearing next to the chat. So how this would look like is that this whole thing here that you see in one view will be just a column over on the right side, and showing you the corresponding cards currently in progress for that particular channel, right? So if I go into any of the specific channels, here, let me go back to Mattermost. So if I go back to, say, the social ledger channel here, what I want to do is on the right side here, there will be an extra column that shows you now cards specific for the social ledger development, right? Um, and this is an interesting interface because that allows you to jump back and forth between the conversation, the chat that is happening in real time, and the social objects, the sort of the slower moving pieces of the conversation on the right side. And I think, to me, this is a great way to quickly build some knowledge and build that around these so-called social objects, right? So if let's pick one here, say the binder protocol. Oh, here, let me pull up the SDG kit here. So if I open this card here, so assume you have a channel, let's say, for discussing SDGs. What could we do with SDGs in the context of the social ledger and the Digital Life Collective. So here's the kind of quote unquote card. So you can see, each of these cards has content, obviously, and then you can open the card, and then the card content is now here in this document, right? And this is not a Google document. This is a thing called CodeMD, which is a markdown editor. To me, this is much more flexible and maintainable than the Google Docs. First of all, it's not Google, so it's hosted on our server. We control that content here. Nobody can interfere here. And second, I don't know if you've noticed, if you work with Google Docs and they grow in size, at some point they're unwieldy. They're hard to maintain and to edit. The smaller pieces here are, for me, a much better way to say, hey, let's quickly put together some thoughts on a certain topic, and have sort of loosely coupled pieces here, right? And each piece here comes also with, you see, an embedded table of content. So I can quickly go through this document here. And in this case here is the SDGs. So some ideas I have around SDGs and the social ledger, and what John Kelton wanted to do here is develop some kind of a game protocol to create these cards in the right context. Could be a regional context, could be a geographic, could be an economic context, whatever it is. And to me, again, if you have these cards, and let me show you also the editor here. So if I click on this button here, it gives you the two-pane view, which is the published text on the right side, and then the markdown here. You can see this has these markdown syntax elements, like this one for the images, right? The headings here. And what's funny also is it's very similar to the development environment I just showed you, right? Where on the left side you have the code running, on the right side you have the result of the code running, right? So this is a very similar picture where on the left side you have the CodeMD stuff, which is the markdown editor, right? I make some changes here. You can see that immediately reflected on the right side. So to me, this is the great sort of offers a learning environment too, for someone who doesn't know about Markdown. How does that work? How do I use it? You can just pull up a template or an existing document like this and then play around with it. It's all versioned, so we don't lose these changes. There's no save button here. It just goes right to the server, and it's concurrent editing if possible. So we can have multiple people going in here. And on the right side, once you're logged into the Cloud Run server, you can see actually who had made these edits, right, for these different sections of the document. So notes, right? So that's the idea. We have these kind of notes. I'm starting to develop those and add more and more to that. Um, and I'm starting to add also some functionality. So there are two buttons right now. One is for open and one is for edit. What I want to do is, here's an example where I put Roy up here. If someone clicks on the edit button, that means he's now an editor of this document. So you can see that immediately reflected in these avatars at the bottom. So you can see who had done some edits on the document. That information for me is valuable for the social ledger later, to ensure that we capture these interactions, right? So who was there when we created, say, this talk time document, right? So you can open that and you can see people participating in the creation of this tool in this example, right? And this is, to me, another thing I want to just record in the social ledger as an interaction. This doesn't say anything about the value yet, or some of the contribution accounting that is coming, but it just says, yes, you were there, you've done this and this with a timestamp. What other metadata we have available for this, right? And once you have all of this data, you can do something with it later, right? So you can say, once this creates some value, this generates some value, you can establish a link between the people who were there, who contributed to it, who developed it, whatever role they had at that time, and the people who are using this tool on some other, in their context, in their environment. So that's the beginning of looking at some of this stuff, some of these interactions with the social ledger in the context of the portal here, right? So where does it go? So last time we had a good conversation with David Boville, and he said, "Oh wow, yeah, I'm doing a similar thing with my cards, right? I have notes, from the last years. I was working on my projects. I have like 5,000 cards." And then he said, "Can I give you those cards?" Right? And I said, "Wow, that's a great example. What if we can just import notes from somewhere else, right? Bring them into this. This is all, underlying structures, the simple JSON file, so you can just import it into the NoSQL database, and we can begin to use other cards too, and they can show up in a different context, right? So if you have a context of, say, protocols, we can filter only protocols. Look at this from a, say, onboarding protocol here, or binder protocol, and look at what protocols we've developed for the collective, and can begin to share these protocols with other collectives and other members, right? But then we could look at his stack of cards and say, okay, what does he do? What has he developed? What cards are usable in a different context? And this gets interesting when you go back to the chat, right, where you have some of these elements popping up in the chat, and then you have the cards next to it, right, which says, okay, here's some relevant cards from David that pertain to this conversation around identity protocol, for example, right? And you can begin to use these cards if he allows to make them editable, right? You can work on the cards. If it's just readable, you can use them, you can copy them, create your own cards. So that creates an interesting dynamic interaction between the different cards and the conversations we have about the cards, right? So that was the conversation with David, and then John Keldon recently had another conversation. I don't know if you're aware, but the conversation community was originally launched on Google Plus, and Google Plus is shutting down in a month or so. And he has done tremendous amount of work in the conversation community at that time. So there are thousands of posts on the G Plus conversation community. Luckily, they allow you to actually export all of the content right now. They give you a window of about 4 weeks now to export your content before they shut down the service, which is kind of ridiculous. But what we're trying to do now is getting his cards out of Google Plus and then convert them into these kind of cards. They're also in JSON, and so we can export some of the metadata. So we know the title, we know the image on the card, very similar to the image on the Google Plus, social network.
Joachim, can I interrupt by asking, if we have like 5,000 cards, how can we categorize them? Are they selected for each conversation? You said they'd be on the right-hand side, but I mean, how on earth are you going to scroll through 5,000 cards?
Yeah, you don't, of course. So this is just the underlying, database of cards, right? 5,000. If we add John Kelden's conversation community cards from Google Plus, which I hope to get into this thing too, there may be 10,000 cards, right? So now at that moment, of course, you have to have some specific, filters to say, give me only certain, cards, and the rest you don't even see. You don't even know that they're there, right? Because you don't even want to scroll and browse through that. So the way to access that is either through a search mechanism, a search box, to see what is there from the 10,000 cards and pull up the relevant ones, um, or just tag them. So what I'm trying to do here is putting the right tags on the card. So if someone like David comes in with his 5,000 cards, I'd like to have at least a set of tags on there so we can begin to filter it and only show relevant cards for a certain context. And the rest is just there to be pulled out at some point, right? It's most likely the owner of the card, David or John. They know what they've written in the past, and they're the ones who can pull them out. And to me, an easy way would be to pull out the card and then just edit them, and then add some additional information to the card. And at that moment, what's cool about this? See this at the bottom here in CodeMD. There's a certain structure, a minimal structure really to say, hey, here's the text, here's the empathy listening protocol thing, right? Here's the author. So two things, and they look like this on the left side here. And as soon as you do this, I can use that information in the filtering method, right? So say if I were to add, if you open a channel list, right? My channel. So if you have a channel called My Channel in MetaMost, right? This is all you have to do. You put My Channel there, it's already saved here, and that card would immediately pop up in your conversation on My Channel, right? That's all you have to do. So out of the 10,000 cards, you can pull out maybe 5, 10 relevant cards, tag them here, and they show up there. And as soon as they show up in that conversation stream, you can do more with it, right? Then you have them on the right side, and you can bring them into the conversation at any point in time you want to. So that's one thing about cards, right? So Eric, your question about what else do cards do? I've been doing quite some work with John in the past. What actually is possible with cards, and it goes as far as we also created some physical cards for the knowledge expedition that we've done at that time, right? So physical cards could be just sort of an extension of these virtual cards, right? So you can use that deck now in a real life meeting with someone else, right? And this is where I want to take this is you can actually show these cards on a grid pattern. So imagine you have the chat in the center, and then on the right side you have these cards. And you have another button here, these yellow action buttons, that switches now the chat into a board, a board that shows you like a grid pattern, anything like a XY horizontal axis, right? With some attributes, left, right, top, bottom. And what I like to do is then use these cards and then actually sort of get into gameplay to say, okay, let's start to relate them. You can drag and drop them into that grid, into that board, and you can begin to sort of sort these cards the way you want to, where you make sense out of these two are related, or it could be anything. It could be process related, they're in a certain stage now, or they could be, property related, something low, high, deep, shallow, some attributes on dimension on the grid. And then you begin to sort of get into this sense-making process. And that to me is an important component for the social ledger too. You want to have these conversations and then move into these sense-making sessions where you not only create these cards and you write about it, but you apply them in a certain context and in a different context too. So they become like almost entities on their own, right? Where you can use them in a grid context, or you can share these cards among other sessions, right? Among other players or teams that are out there. So they become very independent objects almost, right? That play a certain role here. And this makes it interesting for the SDGs, right? Because depending on the context you're in, you do something else with these cards. And here, let me give you a few ideas. Um, I mean, already you can see that the way, they are developed is very card-like, and I think that's also makes it very generative, this whole idea of what do you do with these SDGs, because you just have to pull them in this case, turn them into a card, say, I pick three of them here, say no poverty, and then what you actually can do is take a simple topic for poverty, right, and apply that to your, say, local context. What does that mean in my local context if I'm in Kenya, Africa, right? And then begin to develop, some ideas on this card here. You can edit it, you can view the idea, you can see on the bottom who actually was there and participated in the creation. And then you can contextualize them. You can take that card now and then see, okay, there's a channel where we're discussing no poverty, right? Or there's a board where this card shows up, and you can see the relationship to other cards here. And there could be many, many instantiations of the same card, no poverty, right? So number one here will be instantiated here for a certain topic, for a certain instance, right? And then develop further, right? This is one thing that I want to do with the cards. And the other thing is, Eric has done some good work on agile processes. So it's one thing to talk about this stuff, right? Have good conversations, but it's another thing to actually go into some of the actionable outcomes of this. Where do you want to take this conversation, right? And then having a more structured process around that to say, okay, that looks like we can turn this into an epic, right? That's an epic story. Let's see what the user stories are. Let's see how that breaks down into certain tasks, and assign actual people to work on certain tasks and roll this out. Get this moving, say. Um, and for me, this is another way of using these cards. Sort of attaching them to an agile process, where not only do you have a good dynamic outcome, this is all co-creation here, right? So when we do this, you see that this is not someone sitting down, writing an article, writing a blog post, doing something. This is active co-creation. This is this participatory inquiry, right? Where you draw in people, they get to a point where they agree on what they've done with this card, and then they want to push it even further, right? What else can we do with this card? And then that to me is where the sort of an agile process can take over and say, okay, this looks good for implementation. Let's have a team behind that. Let's get some funding behind that. Let's move it into something that came out of this conversation, right? And then you can begin to track that, right? And that goes through certain stages where you begin to see the teams forming around that. You can see, some sprints coming out of this and some development happening, right? And to me, this is also an important piece of one of the apps that, of course, is also on CloudRun, right? So we have a set of apps. Here, let me quickly jump to CloudRun here, give you an idea what that looks like. Where one of the apps is just doing that agile process, right? So here's an app called Tiger that we've installed on CloudRun. So this is all the set of applications we have currently up and running on our slice of the DigitalOcean server. So we own that piece here, right? This is all open software pieces. And here's Notepad, right, with the different CodeMD cards that I show you. But there are other pieces, right? Here's the publishing piece. I showed you earlier the Ghost publishing piece that's running here. Here's the chat environment, and here's the Agile piece I mentioned. And these pieces are maintained on that server. They are upgraded, constantly upgraded. There are very little maintenance issues involved in here because CloudRun is doing all the sysadmin work, basically. Only if something goes awry, then you have to set it and say, okay, what happened? Like recently we had a problem with the WordPress thing. I didn't want to upgrade, got stuck in the upgrade process. To be expected, actually, from WordPress. So, but then we had to reboot that thing and then delete the other instance. But that was really the exception. It doesn't happen too often. It's very, very seldom. But so we can actually now go ahead and say there's more. If you look at some of these other apps that are out there, that Cloud on offers, there's a whole range of things we could over time add to these services. But I do want to be careful, to say let's not duplicate the services. Make sure we have one service for one, one application for one specific service that we offer. But again, it's our environment here. We're not dependent on a third party here. There's no fee structure that can come out, as a surprise from these third parties, right? Suddenly there's per user per instance fee. We don't see that because we own the applications, and if they really start to turn bad, say, and they would charge a fee suddenly, or they give up their open source branch, then we could just say either stay at the current version, or we're just beginning to replace it with something else, right? So this is the idea is to become very modular. So talking about modularity, let me show you this thing here. So the notion of 21C, the cooperation as a service model. What are the different elements that we wanted to start putting together here with digital life? I feel like it breaks down now into six broad areas. So I call them six sections here. One is conversational elements, organizational elements, then something called social psychological elements. Then on the bottom here is socioeconomic elements, call one rhizomatic elements, and sociocultural elements. The focus right now, what I'm working a lot with is these two here, the conversational elements and the organizational elements. Just to highlight a few things here. One is so part of the conversational element. What do you see, as an important piece to get a conversation going, right? So there are three pieces here right now. One is called programmable chats. One is called calls and cognition. And by cognition, I mean sort of these cognitive feedback loops. So calls, say like a video conferencing call. During the call, you want to begin sort of reflecting on what happens during the call. And for that, I have another app called Talk Time that I want to integrate into the video conferencing service, where you can actually see in real time, okay, who's talking, who's next in line talking, who's raising his or her hand, how much talk time has he or she used up. You can see who hasn't talked yet. You can see stressful situations where you can actually raise sort of a flag to say this is getting off topic. And you can see an indicator of how coherent the conversation is. So these to me are all sort of cognitive feedback loops that we built into real-time conversations that are possible with some of the technology we have. And then, of course, the cards and the boards I just show you, right? So the idea of showing cards in streams and showing the boards and starting to organize these cards and make sense out of the content you're discussing there. So these are conversational elements I see as part and parcel of this 21C cooperation as a service model. But it doesn't stop there. Obviously there's organizational elements, the maps and hold-on stuff that you've seen to show how dynamic this stuff can grow and contract too, right? That to me is an important element to show this is really a living, breathing thing. If nobody contributes, it's going to shrink, right? So over time, you see less and less posts. If you take that window for the last month or two, right? It's going to shrink, less posts, or you saw that fainting in and out, right? So if it disappears, means not much engagement, people go elsewhere, right? And it shrinks further. But on the contrary, if we get more people and they get more engaged, you see this thing growing into all kinds of directions. And it's organic because we can't really predict what's going to happen next. We enable the platform. We say yes if there's a potential interest in certain areas. Go build it and see where that goes. And you can see that part then growing in the map. But we're not structuring it anymore, right? To say, hey, there's this classic, functional structure. We need to have a marketing department. We need to have a finance place. It's more like, okay, this is where we currently are. Tell us more. Let's take a look at the map and see what else do we need to develop. And and we're not flying blind here. I'm not saying, see what happens and then tomorrow come back, see what changed. No, but there are certain patterns, right, that I see coming out of this. And you notice, when we talk about finance patterns, for example, they exist too here, right? So on the bottom here, I call it socioeconomic elements. So we will at some point talk about community currencies. We started talking about contribution accounting. So all of these activities up here, how can we begin to recognize these contributions, make them more tangible, and eventually give out some rewards for all the work that people put into this. So there's thinking behind that. There's a notepad. The member management, Graham's doing some great work with, and Roy too, right, for the CBCRM stuff, where we begin to track, here's the members, and then here's a good place to actually send out some more newsletters and notifications to members about upcoming events and so forth. And then, tokens is a hot topic, obviously, in all communities. So we have to think, how does that relate to the community currency concept that Michael has been spearheading for many years? So that's all important stuff in the financial side. So it does exist, right? So there's obviously some financial aspect. Same with the marketing side, which I call sociocultural elements here, where you build some kind of a messaging house. What is the message? What we present ourselves? How do we present ourselves out there? Notification about events and trends and posts and publications on our website. So that piece, of course, still exists. But I think, again, it's very organic. If something grows out of this, then we'll put more people into this. It attracts. It's really a pull mechanism. It can attract more people, can attract more interests, and then it can grow further, right? And then same with the rhizomatic elements here, where we obviously want to connect this to local ecosystems, right? Local communities, local work, that people can actually derive some value from this. Or Nora Bateson's stuff around warm data is a very important concept for me. So taking relational data, relationship data, and see how we can actually circulate that data within the collective and across other collectives, for good purpose, not for extracting the data, obviously, or selling the data. This is all to reflecting, reviewing, like putting that into cognitive feedback loops and so forth, and see where we take this. So this is kind of slowly evolving, this model here, and I'm constantly reviewing that chart here with new ideas that are coming out of all the conversations I have with different groups. Just to wrap this up, there's one notion of anchoring things up and anchoring things down. That to me is an important distinction. So anchoring up is all sort of the piece that sits at the front, at the edge, and is very visible to members, right? Like the maps and hold-ons to see all the skills and potentials, the cards and boards, so all very visible up front. Versus the stuff that's more hidden in the background, that's more of the support work, the stuff to educate people on what we're doing, and the database stuff, and the apps and the containers, like the Cloud Run stuff I just showed you there. That's more in the background. Same with the financial flows. That is the anchoring down to me, and anchoring down also means, I think I mentioned that somewhere, you can take this as deep down as you want. If we go into warm data, let's say, so you can think about data structures, you can think about ontologies, you can think about taxonomies for that data. How do how and where do you store that kind of data? And how do you begin to sort of normalize that data, standardize these data sets? This is it's bottomless, right? That can go as deep as you want. But it's open. That's the idea for this platform. Is yes, we would allow that. This could just be another hold on and a hold on and a hold on that goes deep down into exploring the relational aspects of these data pieces that we eventually want to share with other collectives, and that's okay. Same with anchoring up, right? So this can go as far as, if you follow some of John Cullen's work, he goes way high up into higher dimensions and has it all figured it out. It works in some way. in a higher dimension, but you have to connect it there somehow, right? So you have to get there through the activities and the user interface elements and what else is out there, right? And begin to sort of reach out to these far-flung, very potential ideas that are out there, right? But you have to sort of anchoring it down somewhere, right? At some point. And that's the idea. So it stretches really into both directions here. This model for CAS, and it really depends on the people behind that again, right? This is really human centric. This is we want to create something that's for humans. This is technology that supports the activities of people, joining, cooperating, co-creating things, and not the other way around, right? This isn't another collective that says, okay, we invent a new token, cryptocurrency, and then go to the market and then make a lot of money out of this. That's of course not the purpose of this CAS model, right? Um, so that's the current state, less around these different elements that are slowly evolving. I think I'm filling in these boxes here. John recently talked about programmable chats, a fascinating area for me. That means, not only do you have your regular chat thing that we all use, but how can you enhance that chat with other things? Like the cards on the right side, like bots you can bring into the conversation that picks up on some of these conversation fragments and suggests other pieces. So there's a whole other world around where you can bring in the community again to help us create the chats, make them more programmable. For example, for the bot stuff, there's an open source platform with a great visual UI where you can actually put together these fragments. And if typical questions come up in a stream, then the bot can react to that and give you the out of the box answer. Or we've done some work with webhooks where you integrate webhooks directly into the conversation stream and then can invoke other applications. Like Robert has done some great work with the MetaMap stuff. Integrate that into the chat. The conversations, you saw the big blue button, right? It's another way of making a chat more programmable, right? So ad hoc video conferencing, right? We have a few people in the chat. They're there. Let's have a conversation, right? Don't make that complicated. And then, by the way, it's also easily recorded, can be fed back into the channel, and then can be further processed, maybe attached to a card, whatever that is. So there are a lot of pieces that make this environment very dynamic, very rapidly, adjusting to what the conversation is about, right? And I want to support that kind of model. Along with the real-time stuff, the video conferencing calls, wherever that goes next, right? So big blue button is one of them. Could extend into virtual real spaces, right? Where you meet in some other space and bring that experience into the mix. And the card-based interface, right? So cards, virtual cards, cards on boards, printed cards where you can do something else outside or in a real session, in a face-to-face session. So this is expanding, right? And this is dot here to be determined. What else is in here, right? So that's just the current state of affairs, and I can see this again changing over time, right? We learn more about conversational elements. I just did this thing called the talk time app, where you can support these conversations in different ways. And there's more to come, right? So this is all open for people to join in, come up with new ideas and then build it out at some point. Okay, so where are we? Let me go back to talked about this. One more thing. That's right. How are we doing in time? Oh, 1 o'clock. How are you doing? Let me just wrap up with this one here, right? Or should I stop now? What do you want to do?
You're on mute.
I'm okay for like 5 minutes. I'm totally absorbed. Joachim, this is just unbelievable. This is like really, really, really good stuff. I mean, this is just, and I just, the SDG, this could be, the whole thing could be just devoted to SDG, because this is the most pressing thing. And this is great. I can't wait to go play, find out more, then talk to my team and really front this in a big way in London, because I've adopted a role that you'd like in London. So I've had a look at the big blue button. What is this final card or piece you would like to present to us?
Yeah, let me maybe spend a minute or two, because that's an important conversation we have with the collective coming up very soon, about a model to how do we actually gather now on one single space, gather these different collectives that are interested in working with us. And there are sort of two models came out of this. One is what I called, that was originally called the multiplex model. So you see this as a sort of a gathering space for each square here is a different collective, right? And it's a gathering place for collectives to come together and exchange their knowledge, right? So more open, that's why there's a dotted line here. It's an open space, and there's one entry gate here. And this could be as simple as a cup of coffee, the fee, for a month, a year, a decade, I don't know, just enough so we could actually support our infrastructure to pay for the bills that we have, and maybe some of the people who work on this. But it's open, and that means it's very, so it's a sort of single entry point with multiple playgrounds here where we can begin to exchange our knowledge here, right? And the other one was actually a more closed version where I see, there are independent collectives, and they want to sort of have their own entryways, right, into whatever they would charge to join, whatever contractual agreement we have with them. So not as open as the model on the left side. So I'm really drawn towards this one here, but also you see there's one box here actually with a solid line here. Doesn't mean we don't have any contractual agreements with certain collectives. Graham has done some great work on actually reaching these kind of agreements, the level of service we could provide to certain collectives for a certain amount of money, right? So that could be still part of this model. I see that here. So I just moved this one over here. But what we need to figure out next is to say, okay, that means that Dig Life Collective becomes just another square here. Okay, it's not that this outer square is the Dig Life Collective. No, we're just sort of an entry point into all of these different worlds here, right? So you join us here at the entrance, and then you can go play. There's a Dig Life Square, there's a Nora Bates Institute, there's a John Kelton thing. There's open learning. You can look around and play wherever you want to play. And that's kind of a change where we are with Dig Life Collective, because there's only this Dig Life thing right now, and then we're hosting some of this stuff and provide these services. With this, we'd be more in the background, more focused on building the service as a platform model, and invite more people into that. And the discussion is now also how much do we want to charge here. We're kind of reluctant to ask these individual players to pay us a yearly, lump sum of, $1,000, $2,000, depending on what service they need. We're more into maybe some of these individuals, that are joining us. It's kind of a fee to filter out, the spam players, right? Those that just want to take a look and get the information in and out. More for people who actually want to contribute here and begin to really collaborate and work on stuff. So hence there's a simple fee. Could be a free tier too, I don't know yet. So make all this free, but then we have to see how we can support that for a while until we have enough members that actually are paying us for this service, right? So that's the very recent conversation. It will come up at the general meeting and later this month, right? But we haven't made any decision on this, obviously. So there's more work to do in that space. All right, that's about it. Lots of stuff.
Have we picked up on all Eric's points? Because I see Eric's been quite productive in the chat box.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just posting ideas as they come to me. So some of these are just things to think about. So I guess if this gets archived along with the recording, people can come back and comment on it.
Thank you, Eric. Can I ask and just say, Joachim, that I'm involved in permaculture design. I'm on the board of the Permaculture Association UK, and they have developed a collaborative which aims to support emergent permaculture networks across the globe and support them through governance and technical support. And they're using Slack. And they have 4 or 5 different sub-channels within Slack, and they would just, they're just like waiting for you, basically. And they will be a friend, and I will broker them to come to use where, this instance that we're describing, and that fits right inside the SDG. Because these are, the very people I think that you were designing for, and is a quick win. So I'll talk. Who do I talk to about that? I mean, is it who within Dig Life is responsible for that?
I mean, we have a core team. If you talk about permaculture, Christina would be a good starting point. Philip is doing some good work. Just to get to know who are the players in that space, right? And then on the technical side, obviously, you can talk to me about how we integrate these new domains into this whole thing here. After we figure out some of the fee structure and some of the, the model we want to use, this multiplex thing that I'm striving for. But that's just one example. I see so many collectives that are using tools where they don't recognize that at some point they will run into difficulties. Like Slack is a good example where eventually they're going to charge money. You don't recognize that at the beginning, right? Because it's all free and you onboard a lot of people, and then suddenly you realize, oh, conversations are gone, right? Or they charge us per user fee, if you have certain features enabled, right? And they really need help, right? So I can see that as a good viable thing for them to offer, right? Something that's not so much commercialized, right? It's not so much tied to the extractive side of things, right? But this is really about community building, about Roy called it the conversation commons. I love that word. There's a post I recently did with Michel Bouvin. I don't know if you know him. He's the peer-to-peer commons. He's really doing a lot of great work in that space, and he had this notion of the conversation commons is sort of a new force sort of between the platform capitalists on one side and the other side, which I call the platform libertarians, that are going too far into decentralization, right? Owning everything personally, right? This is your data and you do what you want to do with this. And you're away from everyone else and you try to make some money out of this, and you're in the old business again in some fashion, right? So that's the libertarians from one side, and then he said, yes, he recognizes this way too much pendulum swing into that direction, right? We got to come back to place where you can develop and create these spaces where the purpose and meaning is so much aligned with the members, what they do. Be that in the permaculture space, be that in the mapping, the organizational learning, the new aspects of education that Eric is working on. There's so much to do and to work on.
And hello, Philip. I just like the multiplex. I just think that is the place. I think that is it. I think slicing that, this could go viral in a sense where it needs to go viral. So I'll find out more about that model because I just like what it sounds like.
Absolutely, we'd love to have you input there and see where we're taking this next.
Is this where you're telling Les that he can watch more than one film for the price of one? Is that the...
Ah.
Yeah, so Philip, sorry, we're just closing up here. You missed the hour.
Oh, no. Well, I have to now, because for the next 2 weeks, our countries can't coordinate, and you've gone forward an hour and we still haven't, and so it now clashes with a work call. Brilliant. Flipping heck. I mean, is this the greatest coordination ever?
Yes.
So I just thought I'd come in and see if anyone was still here an hour and 12 later, and there you are.
So, are we concluding, Joachim? Is this thank you very much on behalf of all of us for a fabulous tour. I know it's recorded. I was expecting a sort of a gentle walk around. In fact, it was a marathon, and I'm exhausted.
A marathon in a good way.
Yeah, very good. Excellent.
All right. So,
Well, gents,
Philip,
short and sweet.
Yeah.
Take care, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.